Welcome to the special commemorative meeting in honor of Robert Crosby, founder of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Such commemorations are held all over the world near the time of his passing, which was 100 years ago, effective June 25, 1919, which is Tuesday, I believe. Our Amberg office and other lodges sent communications, such as the one from our Mumbai lodge, saying, "Dear friends, we send you fraternal greetings and all good wishes on the forthcoming occasion of ULT Day, when we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the passing away of the founder, Mr. Robert Crosby. To present Theosophy continually is our self-assumed work, and which, in our world as we find it today, is an act of faith. As Mr. Crosby says, quote, "Among the many or few who may be interested in Theosophy, here and there will be one who may wake up. Therein lies the hope, and even those who are interested enough merely to listen or to read with attention will get something in the way of a trend that may someday develop. If we keep trying in all proper ways and means open to us, something will come from such mutual endeavors." The Bombay Lodge will hold a special meeting to commemorate the occasion on Sunday, June 23, 2019 at 6:15 p.m. That's about now, our time, by a talk on ULT and the spirit of impersonality. Robert Crosby is fondly remembered as R.C., the friendly philosopher. The fruits and nature of Robert Crosby and the United Lodge of Theosophists have kept genuine theosophy and the genuine theosophical movement alive in the world at a period in this dark cycle when it would surely otherwise have perished. For this, Robert Crosby deserves the lasting gratitude of all students of Theosophy and all lovers of wisdom, and the message transmitted by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and William Quan Judge. Those seeking to truly be in accord with nature's law of universal brotherhood are invited to help us in the work of keeping the link to the teachers and teachings unbroken. HPB was the mother and the creator of Theosophy, the teacher, the message and messenger in one. The new nature of her work exposed her to selfish interest in religion and science and those in the Theosophical Society who are imperiled by her mission or overshadowed by her greatness. HPB referred to Mr. Judge as being the preserver of Theosophy and the heart and soul of the esoteric section. Upon her death, Mr. Judge became the target for attacks upon her, only at last to become victim, as she had been, to treachery from within the society. The enemies of the faith are always from within the household. There is always one witness on the scene. After the death of Mr. Judge, Robert Crosby rose up to keep the link unbroken. Few realize that this earnest man, whose heart and soul were assimilated to the nature of HPB and WQJ, was the agent for the regeneration of the Theosophical movement on the lines laid down by the masters. So HPB was the creator, WQJ was the preserver, and RC was the regenerator of pure theosophy. After the death of HPB, Mr. Judge gave out such statements in regard to her nature and mission as, if taken, would have shown the students where to find the lake of the Zon, the ancient fountain of knowledge. So in like manner, after the death of Mr. Judge, Robert Crosby gave out such statements in respect of Mr. Judge as, if taken, would have preserved the unity of all the student body of Theosophists. Mr. Crosby always pointed to our teachers, never to himself. He claimed no credit for authoring the talks and articles he left behind, as they were all based on the work passed on through our teachers. Mr. Crosby showed the way to any students who might, in truth, be seeking the path. R.C. was born January 10, 1849, in Montreal, Canada. His parents were Scottish. They met and married in Canada. He was raised as a Presbyterian and was invited to join the communion at age 16, but he considered himself still unfit, and subsequent discussions caused him to doubt the honesty of that church's practices. He determined to find the truth, which must be knowledge, and which was to be found in due course by seeking it. He adopted an attitude of constant questioning as to life's object: pain, sickness, death, mercy, justice, fate. He found that the religions around him offered no satisfactory answers when he questioned them deeply. In 1869, R.C. and an older partner started a business in Montreal. Soon thereafter, he married the daughter of his partner. R.C. always had a strong regard for the rights of others, and aware of this, always exercised a strong moral control over himself. R.C. and his partner sold their Montreal business and went to Boston, where they started a similar business, which became well known and was highly respected. One day, R.C.'s partner brought him news of the proposed establishment of a branch of the Theosophical Society in Boston. As the word Theosophia suggested much to him, Crosby went to the first meeting. He recognized at once that this was what he was searching for, and he joined the TS immediately, being admitted June 5, 1888. Soon after, Mr. Judge came to Boston to speak at the branch of the TS, and Crosby was introduced to him together with other new members. After the meeting, upon leaving, Mr. Judge called back to R.C. "Good night, Crosby. I've got you on my list." And he invited R.C. to communicate directly with HPB. Mr. Crosby recorded, "A veil was lifted, a tie was formed, which has never since been broken." Mr. Judge came frequently to Boston and stayed at the Crosby house. When Crosby visited New York, he would stay with him. Mr. Crosby was one of the earliest American members of the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society. He worked unceasingly for the movement and its exoteric and esoteric channels. Few ever suspected Mr. Crosby's connection with HPB and Mr. Judge was more than casual and incidental. When the esoteric section was formed, Mr. Crosby became one of its earliest members. He was first secretary and later president of the esoteric section group in Boston. He identified himself with the Zon section of the Theosophical movement and the Theosophical Society. and was for many years the devoted and close companion of Mr. Judge and a cult pupil of HPB. He loved these two great beings, trusted them, and those whom they trusted. Mr. Judge in his lifetime used to refer students in the New England states to Mr. Crosby, saying, "Ask Crosby, he thinks and acts as I do." R.C. held various positions of responsibility in the ES and was active in conventions of the American section of the Theosophical Society. During the period 1894 to 1896, R.C. was witness on the scene of Mr. Judge being attacked, exonerated, and later prosecuted again by the chief officers of the TS outside of America. WQJ and RC maintained their position that Theosophy alone was held to be the sole reason for the TS, and the officers in its management ought to present that basis at all times. Mr. Crosby's first marriage, having not gone well, ended in divorce, and several years later, in 1900, he remarried and was asked by TS to take up residence in Point Loma, outside San Diego, California, then a newly established headquarters for the Theosophical Society in America. He was required to turn all of his personal assets over to the organization. After 4 years of trying to convince TS to stay along the original lines laid down, he saw that this would not happen. He and his wife left Point Loma penniless, and he got employment at the Los Angeles Times. He became acquainted with his neighbors and who had similar interests in Theosophy, and he and 7 others decided to organize on their own, adopting the original principles and the original program of the Masters, which HPB and Mr. Judge had embodied practically during their lifetime. On February 18, 1909, ULT was launched, and the Declaration being its own was the only basis for that. That Declaration has stood the test of time and still stands today as the Declaration of ULT. It is short but full of meaning. The semi-esoteric character of the ULT was a phrase that R.C. used often. He stressed impersonality and anonymity to protect the work and to help protect the workers from pride and ambition. As regards to himself and his family, Mr. Crosby was always well dressed in public, at work, and at the lodge rooms, so that Theosophy might not be rated on a poor personal appearance. He made a point of this to all those who worked at ULT. R.C. continued his work and communications with others until, when overtaken by illness and pain, he left his body on June 25, 1919, without a word of complaint. Following the principles of the ULT Declaration, Mr. Crosby nor has any student of the ULT made any public claim to successive leadership or teacher. Each student and inquirer has been carefully put into direct touch with HPB, our teacher, through her writings, original and unchanged. Each has been encouraged to study, work for Theosophy, and practice that universal brotherhood which forms the unifying basis of all nature. Mr. Judge's writings have been selected for study and reproduction because they most faithfully and carefully follow and supplement Madame Blavatsky's writings, and all students are encouraged to prove this for themselves. Our first reading is from Robert Crosby's Friendly Philosopher. Theosophy is in the world to present the means by which each one can acquire knowledge for himself. Its study and application call for judgment and discrimination latent in the man himself. We must seek to give aid to all in search of truth. Our value and aid in this great work will be just what we make them by our motive, our judgment, our conduct. The heartfelt desire that others may benefit from our lives will be felt by those open. It matters little how few. They may be the means of awakening many others. It is the effort and the sacrifice that bring the ultimate results. But in our zeal, it is well to consider that the masters have done and do year after year, age after age. They do what they can, when they can, and as they can, in accordance with cyclic law. They conserve the knowledge gained and wait. Knowing this and doing thus, there can be no room in us for doubt or discouragement. Theosophy is for those who want it. We are to hold, wait, and work for those few earnest souls who will grasp the plan and further the cause. It is the work we have undertaken together. It matters not whether we fail or succeed. Our purpose has been and will be that the work shall go on. It is then to the teachings that attention has to be called, not to ourselves, who are only handing them on as best we can. ULT, the United Lodge of Theosophists, is a name given to certain principles and ideas. Those who associate themselves with those principles and ideas are attracted and bound by them only. The basis of successful work is unity. Thus is an age of transition. This is an age of transition, and our work is to hark back to first principles, promulgate and sustain them as best we can, so that they shall be ready for those who need them, drawing our inspiration from the message and the messengers. The course of ULT will be what its associates make it, no more, no less. Its basis for union is purposely left undefined from the exoteric, the personal point of view, in order to make more prominent the true and lasting basis for unity among all who call themselves Theosophists. We are all links in the great chain of the Theosophical movement. What affects one affects all, and in degree. Everyone who endeavors to help others in any real way puts himself in the position of where he must take the reactions. The karma of the Theosophical Society is that of HPV and Mr. Judge, known by them beforehand in a general way. It is also our karma and that of all other Theosophists. We and all those other true Theosophists, true students, are linked with the Great Lodge by aspiration, by service, by following the Master's program as nearly as we know.
This reading is from the writings of H.P. Blavatsky. The wisdom religion is the inheritance of all the nations the world over. Theosophy is as old as the world, and its teachings and ethics, if not in name. Its aims are several, but the most important of all are those which are likely to lead to the relief of human suffering, under any or every form, moral as well as physical. and would believe the former to be far more important than the latter. Theosophy has to inculcate ethics. It has to purify the soul. If it will relieve the physical body, whose ailments, save cases of accidents, are all hereditary. It is not by studying occultism that one can ever reach the true goal, that of helping suffering mankind. As mankind is essentially of one and the same essence, and that essence is one, infinite, uncreate, and eternal, whether we call it God or nature, nothing, therefore, can affect one nation or one man without affecting all other nations and all other men. This is as certain and as obvious as that a stone thrown into a pond will sooner or later set in motion every single drop of water therein. It is an occult law that no man can rise superior to his individual failings without lifting, be it ever so little, the whole body of which he is an integral part. In the same way, no one can sin nor suffer the effect of sin alone. All pain and suffering are results of want of harmony, and the one terrible and only cause of the disturbance of harmony is selfishness in one form or another. Hence karma gives back to every man the actual consequences of his own actions, without any regard to their moral character. But since he receives his due for all, it is obvious that he will be made to atone for all sufferings which he has caused, just as he will reap in joy and gladness the fruits of all the happiness and harmony he had helped to produce. The masters require only that each shall do his best, and above all, that each shall strive in reality to feel himself one with his fellow workers. It is not a dull agreement on intellectual questions, or an impossible unanimity as to all details of work that is needed, but a true, hearty, earnest devotion to our cause, which will lead each to help his brother to the utmost of his power to work for that cause, whether or not we agree as to the exact method of carrying on that work. The only man who's absolutely wrong in his method is the one who does nothing. Make men feel and recognize in their innermost hearts what is their real, true duty to all men, and every old abuse of power, every iniquitous law in the national policy based on human, social, or political selfishness will disappear of itself.
This is from the writings of William Point Judge. How man has come to be the complex being that he is and why are questions that neither science nor religion makes conclusive answer to. This immortal thinker, having such vast powers and possibilities, all his because of his intimate connection with every secret part of nature from which he has been built up, stands at the top of an immense and silent evolution. He asks why nature exists, what the drama of life has for its aim, how that aim may be attained. But science and religion both fail to give a reasonable reply. Science does not pretend to be able to give the solution, saying that the examination of things as they are is enough of a task. Religion offers an explanation both illogical and unmeaning, and acceptable but to the bigot, as it requires us to consider the whole of nature as a mystery and to seek for the meaning and purpose of life with all its sorrow in the pleasure of a God who cannot be found out. What then is the universe for, and for what final purpose is man, the immortal thinker, here in evolution? It is all for the experience and emancipation of the soul, for the purpose of raising the entire mass of manifested matter up to the stature, nature, and dignity of conscious godhood. The great aim is to reach self-consciousness, not through a race or a tribe or some favored nation, but by and through the perfecting, after transformation, of the whole mass of matter, as well as what we now call soul. Nothing is or is to be left out. The aim for present man is his initiation into complete knowledge, and for the other kingdoms below him, that they may be raised up gradually from a stage to a stage, to be in time initiated also. This is evolution carried to its highest power. It is a magnificent prospect. It makes of a man a god, and gives to every part of nature the possibility of being one day the same. There is a strength and nobility in it, for by this no man is dwarfed and belittled, for no one is so originally sinful that he cannot rise above all sin. Treated from the materialistic position of science, evolution takes in but half of life, while the religious conception of it is a mixture of nonsense and fear. Present religions keep the element of fear, and at the same time imagine that an almighty being can think of no other earth but this, and has to govern this one very imperfectly. But the old theosophical view makes the universe a vast, complete, and perfect whole. The great problems of life, why we are here, why we suffer, and where may justice be found, press upon us. It is life and its sorrows that destroy our peace, and every human heart wants to know the reason for it. We must therefore offer theories that will give the answer, and these theories are the great doctrines of karma and reincarnation. There is a mysterious power in these doctrines which at last forces them upon the belief of those who take them up for a study. It is due to the fact that the ego is itself the experiencer of rebirth and karma, that has within a clear recollection of both, and rejoices, as it were, when it finds the lower mind taking them up for the study. As we heard earlier, Mr. Crosby joined the Theosophical movement around 1887, and until his death in 1919, the Theosophy permeated his nature as the living power in all his relations and activities. So, what is ULT for, and why was it formed? As we heard, RC was in Boston. He was president of the esoteric section, and he was in charge of all of the New England sections, and he had been doing that task for a long time. Mrs. Tingley had joined just 1 year prior to Mr. Judge's passing away in 1896. Some of Mr. Judge's colleagues in New York found a key to his place and went and looked through his papers when he passed away. And they found, supposedly found, a diary that indicated that Mrs. Tingley was supposed to be, to follow him in the management of the Theosophical Society. When asked to produce this diary, it could never be produced, so no one else could verify that this was a true statement. However, because RC was in Boston, and he knew some of these very students that foisted Mrs. Tingley upon the movement, he doubted nothing. He accepted it, that what was being stated was the truth, and went along with the work. When Mrs. Tingley decided to change the name of the Theosophical Society and move the headquarters to Point Loma, RC joined the effort because 92% of the population at that time agreed with this decision, and so he went to Point Loma to serve the movement to the best of his ability. And we heard that. He stayed there a couple years and could not come to any agreement with Mrs. Tingley, who had assumed the position of sole decision maker for the Theosophical movement of that time. And not only that, there was now competition between that branch and the one in India under Olcott and Mrs. Besant's rule. And they were claiming successorship from HPB, and Tingley was claiming the same from William Huan Judge. This is the 21st century, and every student can make a judgment for themselves from the writings and all of the statements made by these three great beings. It is very obvious to anyone today that HPB could not have given her knowledge to anyone else, because this is not how we obtain it, and neither did Mr. Judge repeat that same effort. He was simply a colleague of HPB. There was no successorship involved. So today we have to ask as to why Mr. Crosby formulated the ULT and what is its function for the future. ULT came about because RC wanted true philosophy, the true theosophy that was given out to the world by the masters through their direct agent and messenger, HPB, who was also our teacher. So he always stated that he did not believe in diluted theosophy. And if we keep to the original writings, then there is no reason as to the claims and pretenders of all kinds putting all these new works out stating that they're from the masters. The master's agent was HPB. She was the one who brought it out, and it is recorded not just for the 19th and 20th centuries, but also forward to the 21st. RC's aim in putting United Lodge of Theosophists together was to have students from all over the world who had the same aim, purpose, and teaching in mind, and actually would follow in the footsteps of the original thinkers and original messenger, her colleague, and the Master's Lodge in disseminating this philosophy for the future generations who are interested in theosophy. And he uses that title, United Lodge of Theosophists, because it was a statement that Mr. Judd used to make before Crosby. So we see him not repining with bitterness, not being dismayed with uncertainties and bewilderments, with all these cleavages that occurred after the death of Mr. Judge, but looking forward to actually bringing the true philosophy for those who were interested at that time. So that is why he formulated United Lodge of Theosophists. At that time also, there were no original books left in circulation because the warring factions were not interested in reprinting the originals. So RC made sure that the original books were reprinted, and we owe him a tremendous gratitude for keeping those available to the 21st century students as well. Now we have gone through the 20th century, and all of the student bodies in ULTs all over the world have remained faithful to the masters, to their messenger, and to the real philosophy that was brought out by these beings. The main ones being Isis Unveiled, Secret Doctrine, Key to Theosophy, and HPB's Voice of the Silence. Those four were written by her. Then we have Mr. Judge with Ocean of Theosophy, which is a practical and condensed application of the Secret Doctrine to our lives, so that we can, through that study between the personal and the impersonal, come to realize as to what our natures are, where we are in the scheme of things, and make the necessary changes in our nature in order to serve the movement. In the 21st century, all these books are available, but what RC insisted upon was that individual study was essential for the future of the Theosophical movement, that individual study has become a paramount necessity for the 21st century, because if we don't read it, if we don't understand it, if we don't assimilate it, how are we going to then give to the public the true teachings that were promulgated during the lifetime of those three great beings? And we heard that one was the mother of Theosophy who brought it out, the other was the sustainer, and the third, RC, was the regenerator of true philosophy of Theosophy for the future generations to come. Then, looking forward to the 21st century, we need to ask ourselves as the students of Theosophy as to where our duty lies. He said that the masters do what they can, when they can, and wait. So 21st century is just a period similar to it. Each student then has the responsibility for himself to learn it, not to change it, but to facilitate its dissemination to the world in its pure form. The mode of delivery for the 21st century has changed tremendously. We have gone from ocean lines, airplanes, trains, boat rides, to electronic way of using to communicate with one another. So, meeting in different parts of the world and studying the same subject together today is possible. We don't have to be in the same room. We can be in different places and different rooms, but still study the true philosophy that exists in those books. HPB said, after all, every wish and thought I can utter are summed up in this one sentence. The never dormant wish of my heart, be Theosophists, work for Theosophy. These prophetic words was a warning back then, but it did not sink into the hearts of those around her at that time. Today, we are situated in different parts of the world with similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. But the new generation that is coming into these theosophical organizations have a different attitude towards life, and their ideology is a little bit different. There's a new thing going on around the world that friendship is essential to the dissemination of this philosophy. But what is that friendship is going to be based on, no one is willing to talk about it or discuss it. What happens to the similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching? Because if we do not have a common basis to work with, what is that similarity going to be based on by saying friendship? Because that really does not cut it. Friendship is superficial. It refers to the personality, whereas similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching is of the individuality. It is the inner man that is showing us the path to dissemination of the philosophy, which eventually leads to the Lodge of the Masters. So there's a difference here between the theosophical students of the ULT and the world at large, in that by studying and disseminating, by learning and assimilating, we are actually putting ourselves in a position to become at the bottom of the hierarchy servers of humanity. Servers of humanity are needed just not to disseminate the philosophy, which is a very important aspect of it, but actually selflessly work for the movement. HPB, Mr. Judge, and Crosby showed this selflessness in their work. RC's main statement was impersonality, and he showed this in all aspects of his life. If we want to serve humanity in the footsteps of them, then we have to assume that same role of impersonality and make sure that power, position, and title is not what we are after, but simply doing that work. That same statement that Kennedy had said, don't ask your nation what it can do for you, but ask yourself what you can do for your nation, is applicable here as well. Don't ask yourself what the masters can do for you, but ask as to what you can do for humanity on their behalf. That is the key that is going to carry the 21st century forward. That selflessness, that united aim of ULT, wherever and however we are situated, with the same aim, purpose, and teaching, can move the dissemination of the philosophy all over the world. And actually, where RC said one or two who might be interested might wake up and continue in the footsteps of those who came before them. What is this preparation leading to? Well, what did they tell us? The only way we can serve humanity is by our own self-induced, self-devised effort. And we can go so much with the study, but no further. So in this effort then, we are going to come to a point where our own effort is not going to take us any further. We're going to need help. And that help comes when we have become selfless. But it also requires courage and a steadfastness, staying with the philosophy more than one lifetime, obviously, because we cannot get perfected in one lifetime, but eventually it leads us to stand up and be counted. And that's the difference between UL2 students and the world at large. There are no privileged persons, people, nation, or race in the world. All those who serve humanity has to make that choice for themselves. And UL2 students are constantly being put in that position of making choices. And here, the right choices makes all the difference. So, to stand up and be counted is not a one lifetime effort, but on a continuum. It carries on from life to life. So we see that RC's work was essential for the movement. ULT is an integral part of that movement. It is not a branch. It is the only one that stayed faithful to the masters, their program, their messengers, their messenger and her colleague, and RC followed in the footsteps of those great beings, putting the movement on its original lines and carrying it forward. So if we want to become helpful in this effort, we must do the same.
This reading is from the writings of Robert Crosby. Where shall we find a true foundation for a changed civilization that all men and women can see and stand on? It is not philosophies, nor religions, nor political panaceas that are needed, but knowledge, and a wider scope of vision than the vicissitudes of one short physical life. The knowledge that is greater than all forms of religion, even invented, is the knowledge of the very nature of man himself, for himself and in himself. For we are not here as things apart. We are here because of one great sustaining cause, infinite and omnipresent, nor separate from us, nor from any other being. It is the same in all beings, above the human, and in all beings below the human. The very root of our natures, the very man himself. It is the true source of all powers and of all actions, whether good or evil. Then everything that is done by beings affects all beings, and all that has been caused by beings, each one affected according to his share in the cause. What the past has been, we are experiencing now, our lives now being but repetitions of lives that preceded them. What the future will be, we are making now. We are going to have a League of Humanity only when the ancient truths of the wisdom religion are once more perceived, when there is one purpose and one teaching. Its truths are self-evident, not to be accepted because written in some book, nor because they are the data of some particular church. They are the only truth worth considering, because in the use of them they prove themselves true. And truth, as we ought to know, always explains. When we have the explanation, we have the truth. Each one has to make his own verification of the truth, but the fact remains that there is truth, and it has always existed. It has come to us from beings higher than we, because they turned their faces in the right direction and pursued the course pointed out to them.
Thank you for joining us today. That concludes our program. But please stay around for refreshments and to renew the ties that bind us. Next week's talk will be on the middle way.